have some people jumping on. That's very exciting.
Yes,
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lunch and Learn. We're going to get started in just a little bit. Give a few minutes for everybody to get logged in. So yeah, just sit tight for a few minutes and we'll get started right around 11:30. Hey everyone, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. We are gonna go ahead and get started. I see a bunch of people have already jumped in. Hopefully you've grabbed your lunch and are settled in for a great informative Lunch and Learn. I wanted to introduce you guys to our presenter, our guest here today. Today we have from Nutritional Weight and Wellness, we have Leah Kleinschrodt. Hopefully, Leah, I just said that right.
Yeah, you got it.
And just a little bit about Leah's education background. She is a licensed dietitian through the Minnesota Board of Nutrition and Dietetics. She went to the University of Minnesota Duluth and got her bachelor's degree there, and also recently completed her MS in nutrition at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leah, but just a couple quick reminders that we ask you to stay muted during the presentation. And if you have questions, go ahead and use that chat feature. Leah's going to do her best to monitor that while she's presenting, and I'm going to help her monitor that too. So we'll get all of your questions addressed. If not in real time, then at the end, she's going to leave some time for a Q&A at the end of the Lunch and Learn. So feel free to go ahead and type up your chat questions there. And yeah, again, just stay muted, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leah.
All right, great. Thank you for the introduction, Jody.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome everyone who's listening and watching in. As Jody said, my name is Leah Kleinschrodt, and I work for a company called Nutritional Weight and Wellness. This is a local company. If you haven't heard of us before, I know we've done some presentations for pediatric home services before, but some of you may or may not have been part of those presentations. So we're a local nutrition counseling company. Our main hub office is in St. Paul on Snelling Avenue, but we also have 6 other locations throughout the Twin Cities. I work out of the Mendota Heights office. We also have offices in Lakeville, Eden Prairie, North Oaks, Wayzata, Maple Grove as well. So we're pretty well spread out and positioned to tackle all sides of the Twin Cities. But our company is all about nutrition education, and you'll hear me probably say this a couple times throughout the presentation, but we are also about real food to have real health. And specifically for this presentation, we're going to be talking about using real foods, and I'll explain real food in a minute, but real food for having good moods. And when I say good moods, or like, what I mean is that the things that you eat day in and day out affect how you feel. It affects your moods. But when we say moods, and when I was thinking about this group as I was kind of getting ready for the presentation, I want you to think about just how your food choices may also affect your role, whatever your role is within this company, whether it's a practitioner, whether it's a support staff, or the other dozens of other positions within the company. So this might be food affects your ability to exhibit compassion and empathy for the clients and the patients that you serve, and not just them, but their families also and their support systems. What you eat affects your stress level. So that's been a hot topic the last 2 months or so with everything that's been going on with COVID-19. Stress has been usually a big part of the conversation for a lot of people. So maybe you're having some conversations about stress and managing stress with your family, with your patients, and hopefully you're finding some ways to manage stress in your own life as well. But this could be food helps you have patience for questions that may come up, or it may be food really has an impact on how well you're able to think through problems or critically assess a situation. Another thing that I think about whenever I'm doing presentations for caregivers or people in the health profession is the food choices that you make also affect your resilience as a provider. I think if you've been in the healthcare field for any number of months or years, you know that it takes a lot of energy, a lot of compassion. It takes a lot of your own energy and spirits to care for other people. So how do you refill your own cup? How do you build that resilience as a provider so that you can continue to be there for the people in your life, but also protect yourself and fill that cup again? And I may be biased as a dietitian, but I really believe that food and using real food and using food as a leverage, as a self-tool care, is a huge part for your resilience as a provider and for everything else that I've just mentioned in terms of energy levels and patience and managing your own stress and having compassion for others. So this class I really think is going to take a whole new, hopefully different approach to things like anxiety, depression, stress, low energy, maybe some things that you haven't heard before. So we're going to talk really about how to feed your brain and to feed your body to have optimal moods. And kind of in summary, and I will do more in depth, we'll go more into depth into this, but we need sufficient protein to feed our brain and to make neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine, some of our feel-good neurotransmitters. We need good, real carbohydrates. And so when I say real carbohydrates, I mean, these are the things that you can pluck from the farmer's field, or if you went to grandma and grandpa's farm, they would be growing this in their garden. So we're talking fruits and vegetables and starchy root vegetables for the most part. Then we also need good fats. We'll definitely do a deeper dive into good fats, but our brains, if you know about anatomy and biochemistry, our brains are mostly water and fat. So we will hit on water, but our brain definitely needs great sources of fat to operate efficiently. So some of this may sound surprising. Some of it may sound actually really simple. It can get complex, but what I want to do is kind of take us to mile high level first and then bring it down and start breaking things down into a more doable level as we go on. All right, so let's dive in here. I mean, how many of you have thought before about how your nutrition and the things that you eat actually relate to your moods throughout the day or on a given day? My personal example, this was one of the big things that made me a huge believer in nutrition in the first place, was when I finally started balancing out my meals, eating more frequently, and really taking a good look at the quality of the foods that I was eating. I have struggled with anxiety for as long as I can remember. And for me as a kid, that would look like, oh, I would complain about tummy aches before dance class. Eventually, like in high school, I would get really worked up about homework and learning how to drive. And then, I mean, that still expanded even because then I was in school to get my master's program. So I was always worried about something. I had what I always thought was more of that worrying type of nature. But once I really started implementing real foods and eating in balance, eating every couple hours and making sure that I was feeding my brain and my body, that my anxiety improved so much. And I would be lying if I said I didn't have any anxiety at all. Because a lot of days, some days I don't eat perfectly, but I do notice a huge connection if I can keep my blood sugar stable. We will be talking a lot about blood sugar. When I can keep my blood sugar stable throughout the day, my anxiety is so much more under control and I feel way more focused. I feel more grounded and I feel like my brain kind of has that fuel that it needs to tackle a task and move on to the next thing, no matter how many things seem to be coming at me at a time. So maybe you felt the same way. Maybe you struggle with anxiety or depression or some of those low moods. And you just thought, okay, yeah, maybe I am just that worrier, but I'm here to tell you that food plays a huge role just in anxiety, especially, and you can make a huge difference. And we're not talking months, like it's going to take months. This can happen in a matter of days, and I would even say hours. So let's talk through some of that. We will get to blood sugar, which I always address, especially with mood connections. Okay. So let's start with breakfast, and how might breakfast or lack of breakfast in just a second set us up for having good moods or not so good moods throughout the day. So a breakfast that might look something like a mocha and a muffin sets you up to have more brain stress and to feel more body stress throughout the day. So just as an example, I don't want to bash on Caribou. I love a good Minnesota company, but their main blueberry muffin. So if you ever got the blueberry muffin from Caribou, that is 66 grams of carbohydrates to start your morning, which breaks down into 16.5 teaspoons of sugar in your body. And then if you put on top of that, say a mocha, so the medium campfire mocha from Caribou, I mean, that just sounded fancy schmancy, so I had to pick on that one. That's another 18.25 teaspoons of sugar. So now between the muffin and the mocha, you consumed 34, almost 35 teaspoons of sugar to start your day. And you'll be hearing me mention teaspoons of sugar and how I get those numbers if you were ever curious to do some of these calculations yourself. If you take the number of grams of carbohydrates in a food or in a meal and you divide that by 4, so there's 4 grams of carbohydrates in 1 teaspoon of sugar. That's how I get between grams of carbohydrates to teaspoons of sugar. Now, when we spike our blood sugars, when we get that rush of sugar in the morning, we may feel good, like feel powered up, ready to go for the first maybe hour or 2 in the day. But then what happens, and this will be illustrated later, is that we typically tend to crash or get a low blood sugar a little later on. And that's when we really start to get that anxiety bubbling up, or you may even feel panically if you're kind of more predisposed to like a panic attack. This could be a reason why. So here at Nutritional Weight and Wellness, and what I've noticed, and maybe some of you have really noticed in your practice, is that the art of substitution works a heck of a lot better than just saying no to this, no to that, no, you can't do that. So think of this, if you are that type of person, if you do tend to go more towards the Caribou's or the Starbucks in the morning and choose the muffin or the coffee cake and have a fancy schmancy drink, this could be an alternative, a substitution that you can include that would give you a much more balanced start to your day. And now that I promise, at least I'm pretty sure, every year around this time, it does start to warm up here in Minnesota. So a smoothie may start to sound a lot more appealing this time of year. So if you like smoothies and getting out, whether it's the big blender or the small blender, this can be a really nice way, easy and quick, to get some nutrients into you, especially if you have to run out the door and maybe drink it in the car on the way to work. We're not doing a whole lot of driving these days, but in the future, it's coming. So this example would be some plain full fat yogurt. So if you ever see it'll say whole milk yogurt, or you see 4% milk fat, that's a whole fat yogurt. Use some fruit in there. You can use some canned coconut milk in there. The canned coconut milk, you'll find that in more the ethnic food section of the grocery store, like the Asian food section. Get a little protein powder in there, and then there's dynamic greens on here. That's just kind of like a pulverized fruits and greens product that we carry. It's totally optional, but this would be a great way that you would get some good fat, some good protein, and some of those real food carbohydrates all into one drink. And that would be a really great way to start your morning. Maybe you try this for a week and just see how you do for those first couple of hours in the day. Okay, I was totally guilty of this for many, many years. Skipping breakfast, or skipping any meal for that matter. Like, we tend to pick on breakfast a lot, but just think about skipping meals in general. So skipping meals is bad for your brain because it leads to low blood sugar. Again, basically your brain just isn't getting the energy that it needs. So it's low blood sugar and low blood flow to the brain, which means now we're struggling more with anxiety, or we're having trouble making decisions where maybe we wouldn't have before. Cravings is another one that tends to pop up with low blood sugar, and nobody ever craves the chicken, the broccoli, and the butter at this point. Usually, insert your favorite food there. That's typically what you tend to crave. Think about this, if you have skipped breakfast, or if you've skipped lunch or something like that, have you ever noticed too that, do you get hangry? That hungry, angry combination. That is a low blood sugar screaming at you, that hangriness. And that might look like maybe you snip at a coworker, or you snip at your spouse or your kids. Or again, you might feel more anxious, not being able to focus. Maybe you misplaced your keys, or you were in the middle of doing something and forget, oh my gosh, what was I doing? Or you're like, oh, that thing, it's on the tip of my tongue, and I can't quite pull it out. That is another sign of low blood sugar and low blood flow to the brain. So all of those things that you kind of see spelled out at the bottom of the slide, these are all ramifications of a low blood sugar. Now, scientists at the University of Melbourne, so this is Australia, found that a Western diet featuring pizza, processed meats, white bread, sugar, and beer increased the odds of depression by 52%. Okay, that's a pretty significant jump. So these are high-risk foods. We would call this almost, eating high-risk foods. One of our other classes calls it living dangerously. That increases the risk for things like anxiety and depression. So maybe the typical standard American diet is why so many people struggle with depression, or with seasonal affective disorder, or more anxiety. They withdraw, they become isolated. So lots of different factors, but food could definitely be a big one. Just a couple of statistics on this one. 9% of Americans are depressed, about 23, so almost a quarter of women ages 40 to 59 take antidepressants. If you think about that, like that 40 to 59 age range, that's when most women, they're maybe entering perimenopause at that point, or they're in menopause. And this tends to be a higher stress time of life because kids, maybe their teenagers are starting to drive, or their kids are going off to college for the first time. Marital issues can pop up. This is when some chronic diseases start to take hold also. So you can see that this can be a more vulnerable population just for having mood swings or mood issues. Now, antidepressants are the third most prescribed medication, and about 18% of Americans suffer from anxiety. So 1 out of every 5-ish or so people. So think about what you're eating. Could that be really playing a role just in anxiety levels, depression levels? Now, everyone wants good moods. So our formula, I mentioned this before, is eat real protein. And that's chicken breast. That's a good steak or a good burger. That's eggs in the morning for breakfast. That could be salmon or any kind of fish if you're a fish fan, or seafood, shrimp and scallops. We need those real food carbohydrates. So again, think about, do you have a garden out back, or what could we pluck from the farmer's field in terms of fruits and vegetables? And real fats look like nuts and seeds and avocados and butter and coconut oil, avocado oil, olives, all sorts of things. Now, Dr. Daniel Amen, he's a doctor and also a neuropsychiatrist, I believe. And he's a best-selling author of many books. We have a lot of them in our offices. And his first line of treatment for depression and anxiety is to include real foods and start changing people's mindsets around what these real foods look like. So let's put a pin in the foods just for a moment. Let's talk about just some minerals and vitamins that could be related to low moods and anxiety. So we're going to talk some magnesium, vitamin D. We'll mention B12. We really won't get too much into that. But so let's dive into magnesium first. All right. Now, I don't know if all dietitians have a favorite mineral, but I do, and it's magnesium. I love, love, love good quality magnesium because magnesium does so many things for our bodies. Magnesium is involved in over 300 biochemical reactions in our bodies. I think Dr. Mark Hyman, though, also said it really well. So he's a functional medicine practitioner that practices, he practices at a place called the Ultra Wellness Center. Again, he's written a bunch of different books. But he says that anything that is tight, irritable, crampy, or stiff, whether it's a body part or a mood, is a sign of a magnesium deficiency. All right, so let's say that again. Anything that is tight, irritable, crampy, or stiff, whether it's a body part or a mood, is a sign of a magnesium deficiency. And I explain it to my patients that magnesium, when you think magnesium, think relaxation, because that is a huge function of what magnesium does. So anybody who sees me, whether they have like toe cramping or eye twitches, tight muscles, Charlie horses, whether it's like when you go to bed or in the middle of the night. If you ever, I don't know, I'm thinking some of you are in your cars a lot. If you ever feel like, especially when you're in your car, like your shoulders are basically riding up into your ears, like you just have those tight shoulders, the upper back muscles, the neck muscles, those are signs of a magnesium deficiency. Tightness in a different sense, constipation is a sign of a magnesium deficiency. Chocolate cravings is a huge one. And personally, for me, I experienced this miracle almost. I was always the person that like they knew me by my chocolate desires or my chocolate cravings. And my husband always knew what to get me, whether it was birthday, Valentine's Day, whatever the case may be. But when I finally started supplementing with a little magnesium, I changed my food, but I found I still needed a little extra supplemental magnesium. That within 3 weeks, those chocolate cravings were gone. And I didn't even realize it at first when they had first disappeared. And I see this over and over and over in my clients, whether it's chocolate cravings. I see it hugely beneficial for sleep issues also. High blood pressure is another one that I've seen it being really effective for, because if you have tight blood vessels, our blood vessels they have that muscle layer to them. So if we have tight blood vessels, that means our blood pressure is going to go higher. All right, so any of these things, so take a look at this list for yourself and put a check mark and say, okay, yeah, maybe I am deficient in that magnesium. Now, our food sources of magnesium, here we like to go food first if we can. These are the foods that are highest in magnesium. So grass-fed beef, salt, especially if you can get more like the pink Himalayan salt, sea salt, things like that. Nuts and seeds, our leafy greens like spinach and kale and collards and things like that. These are our best sources of magnesium. But if you think about it, I mean, if we had ever followed the previous dietary recommendations of low fat everything. And if you have high blood pressure, heart disease, you're also restricting sodium. You're keeping that at under 2,000 milligrams a day. Well, now we've taken off almost everything off of this particular slide if you're following low fat and low sodium. The only thing that really would be left is spinach. So it's pretty easy for a lot of us to fall into low magnesium levels. I mean, it's just biochemistry 101. If you don't have enough coming in and you have too much going out, you're going to end up with a deficiency. So when we start incorporating some of these foods back in, people notice a difference with how they're feeling and how they're sleeping and their cravings level and so many other things. Okay, so vitamin D, let's talk vitamin D for a second, especially since we live here in Minnesota. I mean, this is our sunshine vitamin, but especially here in Minnesota, we don't see the sunshine enough from about October until middle of May or so here to make enough adequate vitamin D. And vitamin D affects every single organ in our body, and we'll get to that in the next slide. So we want our vitamin D levels to be more optimal. If you get your level checked at the doctor's office, and maybe some of you do check this for your patients as well, you know, a vitamin D level of over 30 is considered adequate. We like to see more of an optimal level, at least 50, if not up to 80. So that's nanograms per milliliter. So more in that 50 to 80 nanograms per milliliter range tends to serve people a little bit better. And whether that is affecting mood or affecting immune system or affecting energy, lots of different ways that vitamin D can affect us. I recently spoke with a client, I believe it was just last week. He has an autoimmune condition, rheumatoid arthritis, and he says, oh, I always notice it's around this time of year that my pain starts to get a lot better, and he always attributed it to the warmer weather. And that may be true, but I'm having him check his vitamin D level just to see if he owns his own company, his own siding company, that now if he's getting outdoors more this time of year and that vitamin D level is starting to come up, that may be playing a big role in his rheumatoid arthritis. So we're having him get his levels checked just to see where he stands. Okay. I mean, so these are just a couple of signs of a low vitamin D level. And it says there on the left side of the slide that lack of vitamin D interferes with serotonin production. And serotonin is it's one of our kind of chill pill, feel good neurotransmitters. So if we're low in serotonin, that can mean low moods, more depression, more anxiety, more irritability, things like that. And I think a lot of people, especially if you've lived in Minnesota for a while, most people are aware of that connection to seasonal affective disorder also. So for a lot of us, we do need to supplement during the winter time with vitamin D just to keep our levels in that 50 to 80 nanograms per milliliter range. Some of us may even need some supplementation even in the summer. It just depends on how much or how often you're able to get outside also. But we know that everyone from babies all the way up to our oldest adults, everybody needs vitamin D. And thinking about actually just in context with everything that's going on with COVID-19 as well, there was a research study that was published just recently. It was in the journal called Nutrients, and it was published April 2nd of this year, so just about a month ago. And they found that vitamin D deficiency resulted in an increased risk of ARDS, so acute respiratory distress syndrome, and chronic disease. So even those researchers were recommending higher vitamin D levels of 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. So even thinking in today's terms with this risk of a respiratory virus and things like that going around, having adequate vitamin D levels could be just one tool that we have some control over and that we could implement for ourselves, but also for our patients. Dehydration is crucial. So I won't go too much into detail here, but these are, hopefully you can see the picture, the color between these two slides or between these two pictures. And these are pictures from Dr. Daniel Amen's book. And it's just the brain on the left-hand side. You can see It's a hydrated brain, so it doesn't have as many divots or like look like it's been hit with little golf balls, basically. It looks nice and smooth. It's a well-functioning brain. And on the right side, hopefully you can see just that there's a lot more little divots, or there's a lot more, the surface isn't quite as smooth. And so that's a dehydrated brain. It's not a pretty picture. So think about for yourself. I mean, things that might cause dehydration. So not drinking enough water, but there's things that do pull water or pull fluids off of our bodies. And that could be alcohol, that could be soda, any kind of diuretic medication. I actually just talked with a gal on the phone earlier today who was having really bad muscle cramps because she was put on a diuretic medication and it was pulling fluids off of her too quickly. Over exercising or too much sweating or chronic diarrhea. Maybe you or family members or patients deal with IBS or just chronic diarrhea or malabsorption issues. So when you do that, we have too much water leaving, so trying to replace that water is really key and can help with moods. So most of my clients need to aim minimum 8-ounce glasses a day, so that's 64 ounces. But a better measure, just a little more personalized, would be if you were to take your own body weight divided by 2. And that's the number of ounces of water that you should be aiming for. And so for most people, that does get you in the range of somewhere between 8 to 12 glasses of water. So that's just a nice, easy, quick little thing that you can remember is your body weight divided by 2 is the number of ounces you're aiming for. Okay, so that was vitamin D and magnesium. But I really, really want to hit on blood sugar. So these next several slides, we're really going to hit home on blood sugar. So this is where I start with almost every single one of my clients, is explaining the connection between blood sugar levels and then how you're feeling at any given moment or on a day-to-day basis. All right, so we're going to talk about high blood sugar and low blood sugar and how all of those connect to moods, cravings, irritability, and a whole host of other symptoms. Just to start with, so high carbohydrate foods. And when I say high carbohydrate foods, think about, again, from the lens of real food versus more processed foods. So the more processed foods, and you see a lot of examples up here, they're very starchy, they might be very sugary, they have a lot of carbohydrates in them, and these are the things that will cause blood sugar spikes. And later on, 1 to 2 hours later, then we get a blood sugar dip. And that blood sugar roller coaster is what leads to anxiety, what can lead to mood issues, which can lead to hangriness, that can lead to brain fog and a whole host of other things. So I just want to break it down. This is where we're getting a little more nitty gritty. Let's break it down to its more granular level. So all carbohydrates, so whether it's the examples that you see here on the screen, like a donut or green beans and broccoli, these are all carbohydrates, but all carbohydrates break down into sugar in the body. They break down into glucose, and our body uses that sugar as fuel. All right, now the tricky thing is some carbohydrates break down into more sugar or more sugar faster than others. So an example, 1 cup of green beans, so a real food carbohydrate that you can grow in your own garden. A cup of this is 7 grams of carbohydrates, which is less than 2 teaspoons of sugar. Now that same volume, a cup of pasta or spaghetti is 43 grams of carbohydrates, which is almost 11 teaspoons of sugar. Right, so a cup of green beans, 2 teaspoons, a cup of spaghetti, which is almost 11 teaspoons of sugar. So there's definitely a difference between how much sugar even a cup of each food turns into. And just in my experience, eating a cup of spaghetti goes down pretty quick, where actually the green beans, it takes a little bit more chewing. It's a little bit more roughage to get down. Another thing to think about, and I get this question a lot in terms of breads, like breads. We're always talking about whole wheat and whole grain breads, and this is so wonderful for blood sugar levels, or so wonderful for cholesterol levels. But the glycemic index for whole wheat bread, so again, this is just how the impact of sugar on the blood, or like the impact on blood sugar. Whole wheat bread is higher on the glycemic index than table sugar. So you will impact your blood sugar more eating a piece of bread than you would if you were to take a couple teaspoons of sugar and put it in your mouth. Same thing with honey. Whole wheat bread impacts your blood sugar more than if you were to chug honey straight out of the jug. All right. So this is where we have to start to think about the quality of our carbohydrates. So I really just wanted to paint that picture right off the bat. All right, I love this graphic. You're going to see this a couple of times over the next few slides, but this really, I think, helps people paint that picture and start making those connections between blood sugar levels and that connection between chronic diseases, but also how you feel on a day-to-day basis. So this one talks about high blood sugar. So here, again, think about, well, the examples are kind of on the bottom part of that graph. So something like cereal. So if you had a bowl of cornflakes, and if you've ever looked at the serving size in terms of cereals, if you do look at it, I mean, the serving size is listed usually as 3/4 of a cup to a cup, but I don't know about you, I never measured cups of cereal. I always measured in terms of bowls. So however big the bowl was, that was my serving size of cereal. And cereal, say topped with skim milk, maybe you put a banana on top of it, that's going to be a high sugar breakfast, because even that banana, it's a real food, but it's going to be mostly carbohydrates. So cereal and banana spike, and then maybe you have road rage on the way to work. Or maybe, again, your brain is just a little bit foggy, or you start to notice like, oh, my hands are starting to swell a little bit. You feel like you're getting like sausage fingers. Couple hours later, maybe that blood sugar comes down. You have lunch, maybe it's a sandwich, or you're having a bagel with some cream cheese on it, some low-fat cream cheese. You spike those blood sugars later on. And that's where, okay, now maybe I'm having trouble remembering things. Or for kind of thinking about women, maybe I have a couple of hot flashes then middle of the afternoon. Or lack of focus. Again, like, what did I do with my paperwork? Or what do I need to make sure I get done at this patient's house? Or how do I take care of this? So spiking that blood sugar throughout the day can have ramifications. And these things, the blood sugar spikes, you may not feel on a day-to-day basis. You can kind of see the list on the right-hand side. I tend to describe these more as chronic type of conditions. We'll get to low blood sugar in a second. That's a different story. And this is not to say also that 30 days out of the month that you eat really well, your blood sugar is more in that green level. And on the 31st day, now you have some spikes. We're talking about spiking blood sugar day in, day out, several times a day. All right, so this is a chronic type of pattern. So that's high blood sugar. Let's take a peek at low blood sugar. So like I said, you may not necessarily feel high blood sugar. Some people do, some people don't, but you will feel a low blood sugar. You cannot escape this. So a low blood sugar typically happens if you've gone too long without eating, or you've spiked first and then you're crashing after an hour or two. So you can see that pattern right here on the slide of it's a roller coaster of blood sugars. You're going up, you're going down, you're going up, you're going down. A low blood sugar, and we said this before, low blood sugar is low energy and low blood flow to the brain. So now you have more anxiety, or you might feel tired, really tired at about 3 p.m. Or that donut or the cookies that were left over from the morning's meeting are now starting to really speak to you at about 3 or 4 p.m. Or you're starting to get irritable. You walk in the door from work at about maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock, and you're hangry. You're ready to rip the fridge door off its hinges. That's low blood sugar talking. And so when you get that low blood sugar going, now this could be where now it's easy to grab the more junky foods, or it's easy to get home and be like, oh, this was a stressful day. I need to pour that glass of wine. All right, where really it's a low blood sugar and your brain's just crying out for some energy. Or if it was more nighttime, a low blood sugar could look more like, oh, now I can't sleep and I'm just going to keep scrolling on Facebook or Instagram, and now an extra hour has gone by. So this is just a couple different ways that this might show up in your daily life. Okay. So when your blood sugar is low, think about this for yourself, how you feel. So some of you may get tired. Some of you may get a headache, or this is where it's the beginning of that migraine. You know, you can feel it coming on. Or lots of people get irritable or that hangry feeling. Or you have a panic attack, or you start to feel panicky. This is where you crave sugar, or you crave the crunchy and the salty, or you have that craving for alcohol. All right. So when your blood sugar is low, you may experience cravings and anxiety. I mentioned before, for me, that is totally true, especially with the anxiety. When my blood sugar is low, my anxiety spikes, right? So for me, my game plan, or part of my self-care plan, is to make sure that I have food, that I have snacks, that I have the nutrients that I need to keep my blood sugar levels stable. So blood sugar levels have a powerful, powerful effect on the mood connection. Okay, right. So more examples just of the processed foods, or some of those habits that we get into that may be causing more anxiety and then causing that blood sugar roller coaster. It may be the pancakes in the morning. It may be the soda mid-afternoon just because you need that pick-me-up. It may be the cinnamon roll. And then for some people, it is the blood sugar. I will insert and say, for a lot of my clients, at least a third, if not more, we really suspect that there's a gluten component for a lot of people. So we may have to do some experimentation of removing gluten from people's diets for a little while. We always work blood sugar first, but gluten may be another tool in the toolbox that we have to remove for a while. Okay. So having trouble sleeping. So who's guilty of the popcorn and wine before bed? All right, think about that for yourself. Or the bowl of cereal just because it's easy. All right, when you're in that low blood sugar state, that's where those types of choices tend to look really good. But think about then, do you have trouble? Do you tend to wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning? And then maybe you're able to get back to sleep, but maybe your mind starts spinning and now your brain is kind of on the hamster wheel for an hour or 2 before you're able to get back to sleep. That's a low blood sugar in the middle of the night talking. So if you've had more of that high carbohydrate snack before bed, now you get that spike, and then a couple hours later, we're waking up in the middle of the night, or you're waking up really early, like 4 a.m., and you're not able to get back to sleep for the rest of the night. Like you're just up now at 4 a.m. So I want to give you a couple good bedtime snacks that are a lot more blood sugar balancing, because this is huge for a lot of my clients and for the classes that I teach. When people start playing around with the snacks before bed and they just notice how much better they sleep when their blood sugars are stable going into the night. All right, so this is one example. At night, usually I have clients just take a good real food carbohydrate and pair it with some good healthy fat. They don't worry too much about the protein at night, so carbs and the fat are kind of the key things. So a small apple, or if you have the softball size apple, maybe you're cutting it in half. And you're doing that with a little bit of peanut butter or some almond butter, or maybe you're sauteing the apples in some coconut oil or some butter and putting some cinnamon on them. So you get the carb being the apples, the good fat from the nut butter or the coconut oil, and you have a wonderful bedtime snack that's going to balance out those blood sugars. In the morning, so again, starting your morning, we gave you that example of a real food smoothie. It could be a good option, and you could even take that smoothie recipe and use it more of like, if you're not feeling like either turning the blender on or you're not a smoothie person, maybe you turn that recipe into like a yogurt parfait. You're using all the same ingredients. You have the yogurt, you have some fruit in there, put a little protein powder in for a little extra protein. And then you can top that with some chopped nuts, and then you have a nice yogurt parfait to start your day. An egg, like an omelet, scrambled eggs with some spinach in it. Or if you have a good egg bake or like an egg quiche recipe, this is a great way to start your day as well. I love eggs, not just for breakfast. I mean, we can talk about eggs at any point in the day, but eggs, people's mind tend to go for breakfast. Because eggs have a couple of really good components to them in the yolk. So listen up, this is the yolk, not the egg whites. In the yolk, they have omega-3 fatty acids in there, specifically DHA, which is one of our calming brain fats. And it also has choline, which is, choline is like a pseudo B vitamin. It's not exactly a B vitamin, it's a little different. But choline is another really important nutrient for our memory and for our brain. So eggs are really wonderful because they have that DHA and the choline in it. So for a good working brain, eggs are wonderful. So eating balanced meals several times a day is the answer to having even moods, no cravings, energy, focus, better sleep. So the goal here in eating balanced and eating that protein, carb, fat combination is to get your blood sugar off of that roller coaster, the ups and downs and all arounds, and get you more in that green area. So I call that the rolling hills of blood sugar. Rolling hills instead of the roller coaster. Think about this, I mean, not only for yourselves, but for your patients and their families, maybe your own kids. Kids operate the same way as adults do in terms of blood sugar. It just might look a little different. So for a kid, a spike or a dip in blood sugar might look like a temper tantrum, or it might look like hitting their brother and sister, or it might look like hyperactivity, or not being able to sit still, not listening. Like these are just some ways that it might show up in kids. Kids wear their hearts on their sleeves a little bit more than us adults do. Most of us adults at least have, you know, if we're irritable with someone, we don't go around slapping our coworkers. We at least have the frontal lobe development not to do that, but kids might not have that, or especially if they're really young. So again, it might look like hitting a sibling or throwing a temper tantrum on the floor. That could be these roller coaster blood sugar levels in a kid. Right. So balanced eating leads to balanced moods. And so when I talk about balanced eating, that combination or that equation we're talking about is choose a protein, choose a carbohydrate, that real food carbohydrate, and choose a fat. So protein, carb, fat combination. That protein, I mean, in this example, it's turkey, it could be chicken, it could be pork, it could be steak, it could be eggs. Asparagus for the carbohydrate, that's perfect. That's going to be in season here real quick. It could be spinach, it could be some sweet potato, could be a lot of different things, bell peppers. And those fats, avocados, the butter, the nuts, the olive oils, these all feed your brain those healthy fats. So every time you're eating, whether it's a meal or a snack, do that equation in your head. Do I have protein? Do I have carb? Do I have some good fat in there? So a balanced breakfast. We've given you a couple of examples now with the smoothie, the yogurt parfait, an egg scramble or an egg bake. Dr. Daniel Amen, I mentioned his name before. So in his book, he has a book called Making a Good Brain Great. He says the secret to losing your cravings is to eat a balanced breakfast. And I have seen that many times in my clients, especially as we can get good blood sugar control in the beginning of the day, that tends to carry over a lot better to having better blood sugar control at the end of the day. Right. And usually it's that end of the day that tends to be, we tend to be more vulnerable at the end of the day to those cravings. So sometimes fixing the cravings in the evening or at the night means we got to start that work way upstream and start at breakfast to get those cravings under control. So a balanced breakfast of eggs and vegetables, or maybe it's a little sausage, maybe it's a sausage hash or something, but get that combination of protein, carb, and fat in there. A balanced lunch. It might look like a steak salad, so cutting up pieces of steak on your bed of greens, have some veggies in there. Or it might look more like a chicken salad. I believe we actually have a good, yeah, hang in there. I got a recipe for you for like a chicken tuna salad type of thing coming up. So a chicken or tuna salad works really well. And a dinner. If you're a fish fan, that could look like salmon with some mango salsa and some sweet potatoes, fries on the side. It could be, if it's grilling season in your house now, that could be the steak with the grilled asparagus. Maybe you have a little quinoa on the side with that, but top the quinoa and the asparagus with some butter or some coconut oil before you cook it. Right. Eat fish if you can. Fish for those good omega-3s, so that fish will have some of that DHA in it as well. But if not, sub out your favorite protein source or whatever your family tends to gravitate towards. All right, balanced foods lead to balanced moods. So it's important to eat that balanced breakfast, to eat a balanced snack, to have some of these lunches and dinners ideas prepared. Maybe you like to bulk cook on the weekends, whatever the case may be. I mean, most of us, we know preparation, forethought, making a menu, it might be kind of annoying in the moment, but have you noticed that the week just tends to go so much better when you at least have a couple of things planned out? You can make up some things on the fly, but usually that's not a great long-term game plan week in and week out. It's a simple concept. It can be hard to do, or it takes some practice. I like to try to say that with clients, is like, it just takes practice. There's always a learning curve in the beginning so that you find out what works for you, what works for your family, test some things out. But once you get in that groove, it is so much easier to make balanced eating really kind of the automatic choice for you and your family. This is what I was talking about. So this is our salmon salad supreme, but you could certainly, again, if you're not a fish fan, you could certainly do something like chicken in there instead, or a cut up pork chop or anything like that. And again, depending on the vegetables that you have on hand as well, you can switch those up. Let me make a point about the mayonnaise really quick, because I usually get questions on this. Mayonnaise, we want that mayo to be a good, healthy fat. Most mayonnaise brands out there will be using a more refined oil like soybean oil, canola oil, usually one of those two, maybe a sunflower oil, something like that. Those oils, we don't want those in the diet. Those create inflammation, they gunk up our brain. So our better choices for mayonnaise, there's two classes. So one, there's a brand out there called Hain mayonnaise, Hain. They use an expeller pressed safflower oil in there. And the expeller pressed part means that that oil has been processed in a more gentler fashion. So that's a good mayonnaise brand. Otherwise, the more recent newcomer on the market is avocado oil based mayonnaise. So there's a couple of brands that are available. Primal Kitchen is one. They just came to Target not that long ago, so that's a good brand. Sir Kensington, they have an avocado oil mayonnaise. Chosen Foods is another. So just make sure, again, like the mayonnaise that you have, if you have some in your fridge at home right now, just check the label. If it's got something like soybean or canola oil in it, just use it up. But then the next time you go shopping, make an upgrade or check the ingredients the next time you're out shopping. All right. If you are willing to just make some of these small substitutions, these add up to big differences long term. And then we always put this fact in here, as of 2018, so there's, we're almost 2 years out now from this, but the FDA, the USDA banned the use of trans fats in all processed foods. So trans fats, that was another thing that they were finding, it wasn't so much it wasn't fat in general that was increasing risk of heart disease and things like that. It was these trans fats, these fake fats, these processed fats that are being used in a lot of processed foods to help make them more shelf stable, to give them the right texture, and things like that. So they've taken trans fats out of the food system. That's a huge win for us in the real food camp. It is still important to pay attention to labels because, well, again, they're probably using the art of substitution as well. Well, if we're not going to use trans fats, we got to use something else. And so always read those labels because what they're using instead may or may not be any better than the trans fats were. So, and we just don't have that data yet. So keep reading those food labels, look for those real fats. And if you have any doubt or question, your best bet is probably to put it back and go with the tried and true. All right, and we're wrapping up. Hopefully you found this information useful, or at least you're able to think through situations in your life or think about how some of the food choices you make or maybe your patients make on a day-to-day basis, how that impacts their moods or how they show up in the world. And if you liked what you heard and you want to learn a little bit more about whether it's me, whether it's about our company in general, or just more about our real food approach, we do have a website. It's listed there about 3/4 of the way down. It's weightandwellness.com. Tons of recipes. So if you just need more ideas in terms of recipes, there's tons on our website there. We have a live radio show every Saturday morning on My Talk 107.1. It's called Dishing Up Nutrition. It comes on at 8 a.m. on Saturdays. So that's when the live show is. But you can listen to it as a rebroadcast on Sundays. Or if you're like me, I will listen to it. I'll download it as a podcast on Stitcher or iTunes or something like that later on in the week and just listen to it when I'm driving or listen to it while I'm doing dishes or folding laundry. Tons of great free information through the podcast. You can hear all of our voices and we just talk a different nutrition topic every week. And then we're on Facebook. We're on Instagram a little bit, but I think we have a bigger presence on Facebook. So you can like us on Facebook to get, again, more free little tidbits and information and links. Right. And our classes are for educational purposes only. They're not intended to diagnose or treat any medical condition. And I just want to thank you all for being on the call and on the video with me today. I am here. I think we're done about 5 minutes early here. So I am here if anybody is still available, wants to ask questions. And you can do that either via chat or I'm totally open if you want to unmute yourself and you can ask a question too. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much, Leah. We did have a couple of questions come in via chat. Okay. So I want to just read them for you. And maybe you could just address them quickly in the few minutes that we have left with our time. So Teresa asks, do you like to use coconut versus almond milk?
Yeah, I apologize. Nothing popped up on my end that notified me that there were questions. So I am sorry that I didn't get to these in real time, but
no worries.
Yeah, so coconut milk versus almond milk. And it's important, I need to distinguish too, when I talk, so that one recipe that I mentioned, coconut milk, I mentioned canned coconut milk. So if we're talking coconut versus almond milk, I just want to specify, usually when I talk coconut milk, I'm talking the stuff in the can. So it's the thick stuff, you're usually not drinking it straight up. If it's the stuff in the carton, whether it's coconut milk or almond milk, it doesn't matter to me either way. I recommend the fewest ingredients possible and going unsweetened. So whether it's coconut milk or almond milk in the carton.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
Next, Judy expanded. What no added sugar brands also check other boxes as healthier?
Yeah, so yogurt. Yes. Yeah, so with yogurt, with yogurt, you're going to be looking for plain flavored, full fat yogurt. I haven't had too much success in terms of finding little cups of yogurt with that. So you're probably going to be buying a bigger container, like 24 or 32 ounces. And it depends on where you shop in terms of brands, but even I've seen Old Home has a good full fat yogurt. Greek Gods is another one. If you like more of the Greek yogurt, the thicker stuff, Greek Gods has a plain flavor, full fat yogurt. There's plenty of organic versions as well. So wherever it is that you grocery shop, just look for, you might see whole milk yogurt. You might see the term full fat yogurt. I mean, just look for that and go for the plain flavor.
Versus like vanilla or the flavored ones.
Yep,
the plain
exactly,
is the key. Okay.
Yep, versus vanilla or like a fruit flavored one or something like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Another question from Tracy. So what kind of bread is the best? Is it better to make your own pasta and bread?
Mm-hmm. Yes, great question with breads. For my clients, I do steer them, if I can, towards like a sprouted grain bread. Most people are familiar with the brand like Ezekiel bread, so that just the sprouted grains, it's a little less processed. It tends to have a little bit more crunch to it. I know Trader Joe's has their own brand of some sprouted grain breads. The co-ops do as well. So if you think more along the lines of breads, something that has a little more roughage to it, like a sprouted grain bread, or sourdough, if you kind of like that kind of sourness or sourdough taste to it, sourdough breads, they have that little extra bit of fermentation. Those can be better choices too. So that's a great question.
Great. So those are the questions that came in via chat, and I haven't seen any others come in. So yeah, we just have 2 more minutes. If anybody wanted to unmute themselves and jump in with a question, it'd be a great time to do that. Otherwise, we'll just go ahead and sign off right at 12:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think there was some handouts that I can make available to folks too that your organizers had sent over. That I can make available to folks too.
Yep, that would be awesome. Yeah, if you had just something to jot notes down on or have some of those recipes available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and maybe you could even go back 2 slides and just leave that one up if you wouldn't mind your Find Us slide.
Oh, sure.
While we wait the last minute or so, peeps could see that and jot down any info or just kind of, oops, sorry about that, Leah.
Okay, there,
yeah. That way folks are reminded of how they can access good information from Nutritional Weight and Wellness.
Definitely.
All right, well, I haven't seen any other questions and it is 12:30.
All right.
So I thank you so much for your time and for being with us today and sharing all that great knowledge. Yeah. And maybe we'll have you back again for another Lunch and Learn down the road.
Yeah, I'd love to. Maybe someday it'll be in person, but for now, I think this worked out. But yes, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Leah.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.